Hello, everybody, and welcome to qualifying for Gateway. This is race number 7 here in the MSCA American Ethanol Truck Series. And we had a very interesting race last week at Iowa where Zachary Fitzwater was able to become the first driver that had to qualify into a race and actually win the race. So we might see some pretty interesting stuff here, but we still have to go through that first set of qualifying. We're going to follow Frodemar Ottis. He seems like he's going to be the first driver out onto the racetrack. The 543 had made a few races early on in the season, but has kind of dropped off in the in just making races, and that can be pretty much due to the fact that he doesn't have any sponsors on that car, and just he had one sponsor on the truck prior to this, and that was Jarritos, which obviously that was only a one-race deal in Mexico City. Which, an interesting thing, we are not racing in Mexico City next season, so it will be a pretty interesting transition for some of these drivers. The fact that they did kind of learn that track and were trying to figure out that racetrack. However, we have a few other drivers that also don't have any sponsors. Giovanni Barraza has had a very slow mid-season. He's not been making a whole lot of races, and that could be contributed to the fact that a lot of these guys have been getting sponsorships. Also, you got to also contribute the fact to those part-time drivers that are already racing on teams. Gatlin Downey, another interesting entry here. He did miss Iowa qualifying. Something to do with the fact that I don't know exactly what the details were, but the 57 just didn't make the qualifying. I believe they said that they were involved, that the truck was involved in an accident on the highway, and it completely destroyed both of their vehicles that they were hauling in the truck. So something that could have gone really wrong with that semi. So definitely a pretty bad break for that team. Gatlin Downey hoping that he was going to have a truck, but didn't have a truck in the first place. He most likely would have been driving the 67 had I believe that they brought that truck in, but I don't believe so. And so pretty much Gatlin Downey was without a ride for the entirety of the Iowa weekend. So that's a big mistake by that team. However, they're back here at Gateway, and they do have two trucks ready. Meanwhile, Jack Porkins, obviously some of these drivers running their trucks from Iowa, since the fact that this track is somewhat similar in the fact that it's also a very, I wouldn't say short track, but it is a mile-long track, and Iowa is also similar in that aspect. Chris Malley currently sitting in third in that 29 truck. This is his, I believe, third start in the 29, so he has, I believe, 3 left. Meanwhile, looking at the top of the board, oh, never mind, the 67 has taken the top of the board. That is Patrick Smith. And then, obviously, the 87 taking it right back. So a pretty big fight between Derek Hamill and the two BCR Mercedes trucks trying to make it into the race. We also have our two team owners, or I believe all 3 team owners are actually driving. Actually, not Ed Ayin Jones. He's still doing that swap off with Alex Cage. So Alex Cage is driving this week. Isaac Nichols knocked off the board, and currently a very slow first lap. Obviously, that's not going to be the lap that he's going to be posting down. However, here's your leader in qualifying right now, Derek Hamill in the 87, top of the board with a 35.4. So a good lap from the 87 truck, but he's got some pretty hefty competition in the 06 of Jacob Poole behind him. Jacob Poole making a start after kind of a fairly long absence for a part-time driver, and it's kind of odd seeing a part-time driver not be racing for that long, but obviously the team wanted to make sure that they had him in a good track that they knew he could do well in. Meanwhile, Giovanni Barraza, we talked about him, how he's having kind of a slow start, currently in 12th. Igor Barreto has also been one of those drivers who's had a very slow season, and he's just not been having the qualifying runs that he wanted to get. Chris Malley now moving up to second on the board. Meanwhile, Jack Porkins also moving himself onto the board in 9th place. So a 9th fastest lap for that 07 truck. And Porkins has had a pretty dismal season, not only in this series, but in the ASCA as well. So obviously Jack Porkins hoping that he can do something good in any one of these series. has been making moves, I hear, in the ASCA, but nothing has been certain yet. He drove for DW Motorsports once already, so that could possibly be where he plans to go. But he is confirmed that he will be driving for Malley Motorsports in the ASCA next season. But still, it's kind of a difficult situation to tell where Jack Porkins is going to end up in the ASCA. Lucas Skye in the 31, the only driver still not able to make a race. And he's even said publicly that he may stop halfway throughout the season. And that could be a pretty difficult thing to see a driver leave halfway through the season when he's slated to run the entire season. So, and obviously Lucas Skye just frustrated with the fact that he's not making races, and that could be the main reason as to why. He just doesn't have the truck behind him. He can't make any races, and honestly, he's not doing himself any good by coming to races and not actually participating in them, which is kind of the reason why he is saying he's going to drop out if he doesn't make any races within halfway. So as we rotate through the field, Chris Malley holds the qualifying lead. Second is the 87 of Derek Hamill. Third right now is the 06 of Jacob Poole. Fourth is Zachary Fitzgerald in the 33. Fifth, Jack Porkins, a nice lap for him in the 07. Sixth is the 696 of Alex Cage. Seventh is Gatlin Downey. Eighth is Fernando Olieza. Ninth is the 19 of Colin Denton. And 10th is the 13 of Isaac Nichols, who is kind of on the precipice of missing his second race of the season. That would be a pretty big downfall for that 13 team if they do miss a race again, as they were knocked out by Zachary Fitzwater, who had the same issue. Stuart Gratton, more issues for him. Cesar Chavez, I believe, is on the very bottom of the board. So a lot of those unsponsored trucks not making it in. William Brock on the very cusp of making it, but still not in there. Lucas Skye still below the line. Patrick Smith, 12th now, as Isaac Nichols still holds that 10th position, which is where you want to be if you're Isaac Nichols right now. And Isaac Nichols has had a very rough season, considering not been the greatest, at least on track, but definitely has some skills that he can use. And to be fair, this is a very different type of vehicle that some of these drivers in the ASCA have been running. They're obviously not running the same engines. They're running a lot less power in these engines. The aerodynamics of the trucks are not as good as they would be on, say, the stock cars that they run in the ASCA, especially the Pennzoil Cup Series or the Pennzoil Pro Series cars. But it looks like right now that the field is kind of remaining stagnant, as we are sitting about a minute and a half left in qualifying. Some drivers pulling in probably to get some tires changed, get that last ditch effort to try and make this race if they're in the back. And this does act as sort of a practice session for what they're going to be doing. And this is actually the first night qualifying session and the first night race that we are going to see. So the MSCA obviously wanting to make sure that these drivers kind of get their practice in and under the lights, since it does make sense that they would be practicing under the lights if they're going to be racing under the lights. Lucas Skye in the 31, still sitting in 16th, and it seems like the field is just kind of stuck themselves into where they are going to be for pretty much the rest of the session, as we have 30 seconds left in this first session of qualifying. 13, still sitting on 10th, Derek Hamill, probably arguably the best driver for that team, as Barretto just has not made any races for that team, while Hamill, I think, has made every race for that team. And then obviously William Brock, only the team owner. So definitely some changes that team can make in the next few races, if not the next season, as we have hit that last lap mark. So every driver that has crossed the finish line by this point will have started their final lap, as we follow Jack Porkins and now Alex Cage in the 696. But it just seems like no one's got anything for the 13 and anyone above the top 10. So I believe this will end off qualifying as we watch the 696 cross the line. 35.740, still not enough to make it in. But that looks like that'll do it for your set of qualifying. Here are your standings for qualifying. Chris Malley topping the board. Derek Hamill going to be second. Jacob Poole in third. Fourth is Zachary Fitzgerald. Fifth is Jack Porkins. Sixth, Alex Cage. Seventh, Gatlin Downey. Eighth, Fernando Oleza. Ninth, Colin Denton. And 10th is Isaac Nichols. The rest of the drivers will not make the race. Neil Barretto, Patrick Smith, William Brock, Cesar Chavez, Mike Montesi, Fredemar Otts, Lucas Guy, Stuart Brent, and Giovanni Barraza all will end up missing the race. And that is going to do it for your first set of qualifying. We'll be right back with your second set after this message. From that short message, we are here now with the second set of qualifying. This will be for the race to set up who will start on the front row and just pretty much any other row as well. As we get going here, Ryan Kendall, the first truck to come out onto the pit road, but the first truck out onto the track will most likely be Alex Cage unless someone jumps out in front of him on pit road. But it looks like Alex Cage will be the first one out on track, followed by Steve Hickman and Jacob Poole. These drivers from that first set of qualifying really hoping to get themselves a decent spot on the field, as already 3 of them have gone out onto the racetrack. Kenny Washington and Bill Cox also coming out onto the track. Meanwhile, Alex Cage leading the 64 around, and Alex Cage has had a pretty decent season. Meanwhile, he hasn't had the best recent races so far, as he has missed, I think, 1 race. But he's had an okay season at Jones Motorsports, but Jones has obviously had not the best season in their own right. The 54 is still below the 26-point cut line. And Eli Bright is actually, well, he's doing a lot better considering the fact that they have had a lot better trucks in the recent races, or a lot better truck in the most recent race, which is Iowa. Steve Hickman has also been pretty consistent with where he's been finishing, as he's getting a lot better off with his finishes. Meanwhile, Bill Cox, his teammate, has just not had the same luck as Steve Hickman, it seems like, this season. So we're just gonna have to watch a few things going on this season, see how they go comparatively. Gatlin Downey now making his next start. Again, we did go over what happened at Iowa Speedway, at least what is reported to have happened. Although still details are coming in on what might have occurred with that 57 team. However, they're back and they're ready to get things going again for this team, as BCR Mercedes having a little bit of a screw up, not really too badly. However, Zachary Fitzwater definitely not in the slightest of screw ups, as he ended up winning and getting himself locked into this race at Iowa Speedway. So a great win from Zachary Fitzwater in that 76 truck. Eric Monaco is in danger of going below that cut line for qualifying, and that could be dangerous for him in general because of the fact that his qualifying has just not been the greatest. And if we look back, he's usually qualified kind of middle of the field, towards the back of the field, pretty much every single race. And that's something that this team is really hoping to work on, as obviously they want to get themselves into as good of a position that they can in every race. Meanwhile, as we look, Bill Cox, the top of the board, and Jacob Poulos. Every time Jacob Poulos is in a race, it seems like he's up at the top of the board, and it's an odd thing to see, but at the same time, it does make sense considering the fact that his team has the top 2 spots in points locked in. So, something to make a note of is Jacob Poole now up at the very top of the board. Zachary Fitzgerald in the 33, another good race qualifying for him. Fernando Olieza in the 54 in the 3rd, so a nice run for that team so far. As we're nearing about halfway through this session, I believe every driver has come out and made at least one lap so far. And we were talking about Bill Cox. He hasn't had the same, luck as his teammate in the 64. And I keep mentioning this team because obviously it's one of the biggest teams to mention, with the fact that they have 2 of the most veteran drivers, considering they started in the first season of this series in 2010, or actually 2011. So it's a pretty 2010 or 2011. I'm not completely sure about. I forget. It's kind of racking my brain a little bit. But they've been racing in this series since the inception, and considering the fact that they're still in this series, as well as Derek Yarworth in the 80 truck and doing well, really is a testament to how well these drivers have been going on, as Bill Cox, I believe, is nearing 60. Nick Pericles finished, I believe, 3rd last week. Arnold von Hindenburg in 3rd right now. However, his teammate Antonino Russo topping the board. 17 of Nathan Howman in 2nd. Derek Hamill in 3rd. Nice lap for him, 35.2. And that really eclipses what they were running in that first session. So, very, very good laps being run right now. The top lap being a 35.1. And Dorellis Motorsports looking to get the 17 back in victory lane, as well as getting the 25 and the 37, their second wins of the season. However, that's going to be a tough order with this series and how it's been kind of going, as a lot of good drivers have been stepping up to take on this, I guess you could say, giant of Dorellis Motorsports, as well as Farfam Motorsports. Although Farfam has kind of fallen off from what they were last season. They definitely had a decent program last season, but they kind of fell off with some trucks, definitely. The 76 being one of them. But the 76 being the first one to get a win, and I think the only one to get a win for that team last year too. So obviously the 76 is definitely one of their better teams in that regard. Still the 26 up at the top of the board. Now Jason Kranz taking over the top of the board. Jason Kranz with a great lap, 35.18. And that's beating Antonino Russo's 35.19. So that team obviously has a lot of speed going. Tristan Allen in the 98, as well as the 13 of Isaac Nichols. Both of them not doing well. As you can see, these are kind of the drivers who are towards the back of the field. Colin Denton in 19th. Colin Denton is a pretty interesting entry as well. However, the 90, 31st, very, very low qualifying effort for the 90 of Kenny Washington, so something has to be going up with that 90 truck, considering the fact that he's usually up front every week. Jennifer Power in 30th, so some of the best. Bill Cox slow on the front straightaway. Possible issue for the 22 as he kind of gets off into the grass. Just hoping that he doesn't get in anyone's way as Derek Hamill coming around. Most likely sees Derek Hamill in the mirror and will move down. So the 22, obviously showing his experience with that sort of thing, having an issue and being able to avoid getting wrecked. Something that Bill Cox has definitely shown there. Rick Witt in 25th, and this team of Rage Attack Racing has not had the best efforts in qualifying. Rick Witt especially. It's kind of hard to see Rick Witt doing as bad as he is currently. He's usually not this low in the standings. I believe he finished 8th last year in standings. Behind him is the 24th Kieran Pangborn. As we're coming down to the last minute and a half of the session. Kieran Pangborn currently in 14th, so good run for Kieran Pangborn. And Russ Kamoski, 34th on points, on time. So Wade Enterprise is having an issue with the 4 and the 90, and obviously it's only those two trucks that are really having the problems with qualifying, because the 06 and the 60, 10th and 6th. So I don't know if Wade Enterprises is just not having a really good day with those two trucks, or if it's something just specific to that team, but or it could be the drivers themselves. They probably haven't run this track before. Considering the fact that I don't think Russ Kamoski has raced in the ASCA, and Kenny Washington, obviously, this is his first season in the Copperhead Amateur Series, so definitely some issues for this team. At least half of this team, the half that's in the half that they really should care more about, considering that they're 1 and 2 on point standings right now. As we continue to look through the field, it looks like I saw the 88 and 33rd. So that could be a problem for Revolution Racing as well. As there can be a certain point where the track does not allow a whole lot of passing. I could be wrong in where I thought the 88 is. It was kind of rolling through a little bit quickly. Fernando Ole is in 17th, so a nice job to get himself around that halfway mark in qualifying. As we continue to look on, Tanya Breyer in 8th, a nice run for her. Or now into 9th, as the 88 puts himself into 5th. So a great lap by the 88 of Mitchell Henderson to get himself into 5th on the very end of the qualifying session. As that was the end of the standby. Jason Kranz and Antonino Russo will make up the front row. Nathan Howman in 3rd. Derek Hamill, a great run in 4th. And 5th is Mitchell Henderson. That will be your top 5. Hindenburg, Poole, Malley, Breyer, and Rowe will make up the top 10. In the top 20, Trencherman, Fitzwater, Seidel, Kendall, Pangborn, Downey, Hickman, Olieza, Yarworth, and Denton. That'll be your top 20, as the rest of the field, a bit of an odd, a few oddballs in the rest of the field, as Daniel Bouchard, and especially the two Wade Enterprises trucks being all the way down in the bottom. But that'll do it for your qualifying session. We will see you guys in the race here at Gateway.